Hi everyone, we're here to talk about virtual production, and we have assembled a great set of brains, a bit of a brain trust to walk you through what virtual production means for us at the Mill. There's a lot of noise around virtual production at the moment. It's quite a confusing space as well. So I think a lot of people are really looking at this thinking, is this practical for me to use on set? Does it cost me a fortune? Where's the real opportunity for me here? And is it not just open to huge Hollywood Mandalorian style productions and that scale? So we want to kind of disentangle some of that. That's what these guys are going to do. Chappers and I here from London are going to just blast through some of the early stuff. And well, do you want to introduce the rest, Chappers?
Yeah. Basically, we're just, me and Adam are going to give you a bit of a top line, more so than he's already given at the start, and then we're going to do a bit more of a deep dive. First going to Mick, who's out in LA, and he's going to be talking about building virtual environments for real time. Then sort of handing over to Gavin in New York, and he's going to talk about his experience of shooting with LED screens on set. And then finally handing over to Jeff, who's also out in New York, and he's going to be talking about performance capture of virtual characters.
I think first to kick off, I don't think we would have got to where we are today without some of the pioneering work that has been done in film. You look back at things like Avatar, James Cameron, and what he was doing with markerless facial capture to really see those characters emote live, and what he was doing to visualize those spaces with virtual cameras. And that was carried through as well. Jungle Book and Lion King by Jon Favreau, and then to The Mandalorian now, which is obviously got lots of people excited. It's these huge, vast LED canvases. But for us, what we consider it to be is a suite of tools that is all the way through the production process. It's not just about these big LED screens. It's about real-time previs, what that's doing for us. It's about virtual location scouting. It's about visualizing your assets on set, and creating those virtual environments that end up on those LED screens. But how do we do that, and how do we drive live characters with performance capture? So all of that is happening now live.
Yeah, and the huge benefits of that for all the filmmakers involved. That's taking out, like Adam was saying, some of the guesswork to kind of give everybody involved the kind of tools to make the right creative decisions. So you end up with better shots, better creative process, and then better final output.
So, our work in this was given a bit of a kickstart when we got involved with the Blackbird, which, for anyone who doesn't know, was an electric car actually that we built that could actually be any car. So it had a live real-time rendered car over the top that you could switch out and configure on the fly. We had to build a tool to visualize that through the camera viewfinder in order for the DP to be able to frame up to that car.
From that point forward, there was quite a lot of trickle down that came from it. So we had things like Adam was saying, the tracking through the principal camera we used on a number of productions to put CG objects in space. So if you can actually see your live character or environment on set, your director, your DP, your heads of department can make the decisions they'd not naturally normally make by actually seeing things there for real. Also with that is the look. So we took the sort of camera feed tech, and we'd been working with Epic using Unreal Engine for the rendering of the stuff, Blackbird. And what we've done is we've taken the live camera feed and be able to pump that through the engine to light the objects in shot. So you get live reflections, live lighting. So if the lighting changes on the CG object, the render through camera will display that. So you get good looking interactive CG objects in camera. So those two bits of tech improved our CG workflow and working on set massively for visualizing this stuff. Then the next challenge was, how can we make this more accessible? Because all that stuff takes quite a bit of kit and quite a bit of setup time, to get it up and running. And we started looking to mobile tech and AR kit. So we made a tool called MilScout, which basically uses AR tracking technology through your mobile as an app you can take anywhere. Anybody can download, or you can send it to anybody you can download onto their device. And so you can take that out on recce's with you. You can have it live on set. And basically, it's a cut down version of what we've talked about previously. So it's tracking CG objects, whether that be a character or an environment, live into the shot in front of you. You can hold up your mobile device, and we used it quite a lot on a direct line job where we had to visualize Bumblebee on set. And you're trying to line up a camera to a 30-foot robot, and you kind of think you're getting it about right. But then once we got the sort of iPad up, had a look at the framing, we're like, actually, no, we need to be a load further back on a wider lens. And this ends up for more comfortable shots, better framing. We're not trying to force a CG object into a framing that doesn't quite, work for it, and just ends up for a better end result. So yeah, that's been a really cool bit of kit, and also just one that we can tangibly put in anybody's hands.
So yeah, alongside MilScout, I think the other evolutions in this space in terms of scouting spaces and actually building environments is with virtual reality as well, which there's some amazing tools that have come out that allow you to actually build your environments on the fly in virtual reality and make that a much more collaborative process than it ever has been before. So, you can collaborate with people wherever they are in the world, be in the same virtual space, and actually be working out the blocking of a space or the production design. So this kind of virtual problem solving, whether that be with augmented reality or virtual reality, is enormously exciting for filmmaking, I think.
Some of the previous side of things, and like how using this game engine tech, people don't have to look at grayscale boxes, and have that leap of imagination. We can leverage pretty quickly with some of these collaborative workflows, but also just kind of using the native real-time game engine nature of it to have good looking objects from the outset and building stuff up, already looking good. So and tweaking lighting and things like that. And then we have the scenes up and running. We have people collaboratively building and working on the environment, whilst we have somebody actually sitting in the room with the directors, moving cameras, moving lighting, playing back, looking at the edit, changing edit points, doing all that stuff that historically would be, from a visual effects standpoint, a sort of 2D editorial thing. Actually having that expanded out, and the stuff you can edit within 3D live is just like another level of kind of creative collaboration.
I mean, that for Sky was incredible, to have the client sitting on your shoulder and going, all right, what does that car look like in blue? What happens if I swing that sky around? What happens if I change the lighting? And you can just do it straight away.
I think it's worth noting as well is that when you're on the day of the shoot, nobody really cares about the tech. What they care about is getting the best looking picture and the best performance. So the closer we can get to a more realistic environment, the closer we can get to a more realistic experience, the better performance we're going to get overall.
Really, all you're trying to do there is, with all of this stuff, is bring it closer to reality, right? And with the case of LED screens and stuff, which we'll come to, is just, that's a step closer to doing it for real.
Yeah, because that's one of the mistakes that, when we used to do fully CG or have to guess, the camera work would be wrong, the performance would be wrong, just the speed of the shot, because it wasn't set in a real world. It wasn't set in anything tangible. So I think the more you can give that experience to the filmmakers as a real, well, tangible things to look at, the more realistic it's going to be overall.
Yeah, for sure. And I think when we've got camera tracking and combine that with the ability to create real-time environments, that's where it gets really exciting. And this is what's driven the sort of explosion of LED walls that we've got them popping up all over the place. This little example here is quite a well-known example by Epic. What it does do is show really clearly what happens with a movement of camera and how that's translates through to a virtual world. That means that you can shoot almost as if you're on location. This lighting that envelops the character really does transport the subject into that environment. And it's the same technology that we've been using in CG, the image-based lighting, where we wrap a whole sphere around the subject to embed them into that scene, taking that guesswork out and allowing you to frame shots, getting those happy accidents and be able to see what you're actually going to get. Yeah, so we've got Mick here from LA who's going to help describe how you actually build these environments. He was involved with building this one.
Coming into production, it's the way I like to work is like chat with the directors, chat with the producers, and go over and chat with the concept artists on the production end of things. Once we get concept, we find it like really easy to like sit down and block something out. And the great thing about where the industry is going today is that concept artists are not just doing 2D paintings anymore. They're jumping in and they're starting to be concept artists within Engine, which is great because then they can work with directors and flush out things super quickly. So as they're fleshing them out, us on the VAD department side of things, we'll start to get files from these guys and rough block-ins of where the director wants to go. We'll take it, we'll start cleaning up a previous style and start laying out the land with all the tools that we have at our disposal. Let's say like quick small mega scans, if we need to put rocks in there and like flush everything out. If we need to put dead trees in there, we've got all of this. If we want to do custom photogrammetry, we could go out and take photos of rocks and buildings and everything else and convert these into 3D models pretty quickly and be able to get that into the engine and work with the director as creatively as possible with him sitting next to you. And another nice thing about the way that we work with directors on set is if they just have a little bit of knowledge of Unreal Engine, like this one project that I'm working on at the moment, they would just sit down with you, and if there's a bit of a creative block within the artist, or they have a vision that they need to quickly get down, they could jump into the engine, start moving things around as fast as possible, and start laying out the land.
I think what's really interesting, Mick, is the control. Like just having a camera there and be able to change the lighting, change the position of the environment so quickly. It's like,
right.
Again, going back to what I was saying before, you don't need to understand it, but as a filmmaker, anyone that's involved in the production, they realize the speed and the power of something like that. Just because, whereas if you're on a real location and you're not happy with what you're seeing, you're moving the camera, you're changing, it's a big setup,
right.
You're going to move hundreds of feet. With this, the power of being able to swing the environment around, change the lighting, add objects, take things away, it's incredibly powerful. I think one thing I'm always curious about is the team of people that drive something like that on the day, like understanding, is this, do you have 2 people running the environment, 2 people grading, like a little bit more, like what kind of team do you normally have on something like that?
Well, that's great. Like the VAD department will normally consist of like 5 to 6 people. So VAD meaning virtual art department, and day of shoots normally we'll have about 3. So we'll have someone in there that'll come in and he will specifically be working with the lighting. If director needs anything done, he'll chat to this artist specifically on the lighting. He'll jump in, do it on the fly. And even as the director is filming, he could ask the lighting artist on set to give me an animation of the light moving from left side of the world to right side of the world, going from morning to afternoon or mid-morning while he's doing his shot. So we have those guys, and then we have the prop artists. So if the director wants more rocks or more tree or foliage or anything like that into it, well, as he's going through, he might look at his character and kind of be like, well, I want it to be in like a thicker brush of grass at the moment. Can you guys put this together for me? So that's why artists will come in and they'll just start building it out on the fly. There's so many tool sets in there with the paint tool, and being able to like quickly flush out something with a lot of grass, a lot of flowers, even attaching rocks to everything. The third artist would be more of like capturing the animation, capturing the mocap within everything, and making sure that that's working within the environment. And then from that point, we build the environment around the animation, because now you know what your focus is, you know what your camera's looking at, and you know the motion of something. So when you're placing rocks or plants, you might start viewing it in a different way. Instead of just being wide open spaces that you're building up, now you're framing a huge Jurassic plant that's going to sit next to the dinosaur that you kind of want to highlight.
The cool thing about that as well is that all that decision making, which is a really creative process, often happens for us, or traditionally for us, later in post, far further down the line, actually when things get quite expensive. To iterate later is much more inefficient and expensive than it is to just do it on the fly up front and get those decisions nailed and locked down first. So it's that flexibility that not only creative freedom, but I think there's a cost efficiency there of pushing things a bit earlier.
If you're making creative decisions as a group with all the right departments there under one, in one room. Whereas later, if you're making those decisions, it's based, you're trying to get hold of the director and the DP. They may not necessarily be in the suite with you. So having all those people actually standing there discussing and actually seeing something that's there in person is amazing. You're making the right decision as a group instead of it being this sort of disjointed post decision later in the process. I think the biggest question I get asked all the time when people talking about virtual production, it always seems like this unobtainable sort of thing of that only Hollywood can use, Jon Favreau's of the world, and so on. And obviously we're used to working in commercials and with shorter schedules and budgets. And a lot of the questions people ask is the green screen dead? My simple answer is no, because you always got to use the right tool for the right job. So it's not trying to shoehorn a piece of technology for the sake of using it. Virtual production is amazing. It's powerful. There's still a place for green screen, blue screen, depending on the type of shoot. But I think as things become more accessible and screens are more readily available and people have more experience. And I think that using the screens is great. And there's a sort of simplified version. Do you need to have the fully tracked CG environment? Can you use, is there other ways to use it? And one of the questions I got asked the other day is can any filmmaker, any director use these screens? And I'd say yes, because it's anybody, even from a visual effects side of things or from a director, they're the king of smoke and mirrors, of using the best tricks to actually try to film the best images with the limited resources. And these screens are no different. I think having smaller screens is quite powerful as well and quite flexible. Having your main screen, but then having smaller screens you can actually move to do different setups. You might want to do a cutaway over in the other side of the stage where you're setting up the main stage. Really, the flexibility of having those different sizes of screens really, to me, was quite powerful. The thing I didn't realize as well when actually shooting with these, which was really exciting, is the screens obviously are for your backdrop, for your images that you're actually going to see in camera as final pixels, but they're really powerful as a lighting device and for reflections and also for flagging as well. One thing I was just amazed is using the reflections as, with stock footage or using it as a flag, just creating shapes on the fly for the DP to craft the light. Say, for example, on a car commercial, you want to flag off one side, you want to bring out a highlight or a detail on the hood. Using the screens, not just thinking about it as a screen content, using it as a lighting source. And that was really powerful when we had an array of stock footage that we used as well. Say you wanted a lightning storm. So we've got the car there, for example, you've got the light, but you're actually using the storm or a piece of stock footage with lightning to actually drive the reflection in that realistic environment as well. So not always thinking about the screens as a backdrop, thinking of it as a lighting tool for the DP to flag and craft the light around a subject. There's still a place for a live action backdrop that wraps around, a photo, an image that you go out and shoot. You can still go out and build that and actually put it up on the screen because you're still dealing with a real backdrop, real lighting, real reflection. So that was really interesting, not to have to go with the most bells and whistles approach. There is versions of this that you can be used, especially in our advertising world where we have to work with a much more compressed schedule. And then there's other times where there's a sort of 2.5D in between. Like if you want to bring that live action backdrop into a game engine and then start placing CG objects in between that you could actually move around and track, and you still have parallax, but you're still using it the main backplate as your environment. So there's lots of different ways to kind of shoehorn it together without going full Mandalorian style, as they call it, where a lot of budgets and a lot of schedules in the advertising world, we just don't have the time. So I think there's a lot of ways around to actually cheat it and actually still get a beautiful backdrop as well.
Was the motivation for this, Gav, to a cost-saving motivation to not have to travel to all these locations, or was it a creative one?
Well, on this particular project, it was during COVID, so there was the limitation of traveling, there was the cost and the schedule to taking place as well. But we essentially shot four 30-second car commercials in 2 days. Now, obviously, there was the pre-light and the setup that you would have for any shoot, but the carbon footprint, as you call it, there was no crews traveling around. There was no safety issues as regards to staying at hotels and so on. So it really was this contained unit. And once it was set up, it was very quick to use and very powerful. And we basically had 4 different environments that were in different parts of America all under one roof and swapped out within an hour or two. One thing that I found really interesting and a bit of a misconception when you come to scheduling and planning is that if people feel like you invest in virtual production, that flips on its head and you actually spend all this time getting the screen content on there, and then all you really have to do is edit and grade. Now, sometimes that can be true. You can walk away with final pixels or great looking shots, but I think a more 50-50 approach, what I found is probably more realistic, because there is a lot of work to still be done. But the thing is, you don't want to confuse yourself. Even if you shot at a real location, not on a virtual production stage, there's still, as we know, there's still not perfect shots necessarily. Like you go and shoot at the top of a mountain, you have a real mountain there, but maybe they want to add more mountains, maybe they want to change the sky. So we have to think about virtual production, and that even if you have this realistic environment, there may be still things that will have to change. And I think that's where it gets exciting about what Mick was talking about. You can make those changes on the day.
You're also, I guess, starting from a, when we then go and take it into post, you're already starting from a pretty good place, right? Even if you had to strip out the background, as long as it's not going to, turn from day to night, you're already starting on a pretty damn good base point, right?
The great thing about the screens, you've got real light, real reflections, and that's given you such a great base to add and plus the image. So I think that's, a really, really good and really powerful thing. The screens are no different to what we did with green screen. You would still, or with stage design, you still would dress out the foreground. You would still lay and put plants down or rocks down in the foreground around your subject. So you have a real tangible set, and the screen is really interacting with that. And that's the trick of that filmmakers have been doing for years, and so on. And same with practical effects, again, blending where the reality on your stage, on your shoot, and where the backdrop is. So rain effects, smoke, wind, all of that great stuff. You're really tricking the viewer into thinking, well, what's in camera, what's real, and what's actually a virtual screen? Well, hopefully, if you've done your job right, they will never ask that question. And that's why when somebody asked me a question, can any director use this technology? And I said, yes, because they've been using all of the tricks of the trade for years, throughout their whole career. This is just the next logical step. And it's definitely a lot easier than shooting and turning up with a giant green screen with tracking markers all over it, not knowing what you're actually looking at. You can walk away with finished pixels, finished shots. Some of the shots we actually got with limited resources actually look great in camera, with the in-camera practical effects, with the snow and the wind, with the actual backdrop. One of the things that was really important with us is to have that big vista, have the background far enough away where you weren't questioning the parallax. In one particular city setup, the buildings were quite close. So we ended up replacing a lot of the background and building parallax in. But the key is the reflections on the wet down of the concrete, the reflection from the car gave us such a solid base. So switching out that background was compositing A over B, and it just gelled. Whereas if it was been a green screen, would have had a lot of shoehorning and compositing just to get those two images together. But the point I'm making is that having such a good base, having the reflections, the lighting, and all of that stuff, you're in the right world. You're 50% there. So anything you're going to do in post just really becomes simpler and a lot easier.
Off the back of all the opportunities that we've got with LED stages, another really interesting area is when you're combining the ability to visualize virtual environments with performance capture. It's been quite a focus for us over the last 2-3 years, and what we can do with real-time animated characters, both in film spaces, but also live entertainment and experiential outputs as well. So, Jeff, do you want to take us through what you've been doing in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone's sort of seen the Gollum and Avatar and the traditional methods of how visual effects have captured characters and motion capture in the past, and that's usually a guy getting in a spandex suit with some ping pong balls and walking out into a big stage with a bunch of cameras. And those cameras all sort of project down and track these dots, and they call that space this volume, this optical volume. And that's traditionally been how we've captured motion, and it's still, even today, the highest fidelity as far as accuracy for tracking and how it's used, and it's still used today. What has changed in the last several years is the introduction of game engine rendering and technology in marriage with that tech. My idea was to have a way that we can generate character animation very quickly, but not necessarily have to go out into one of these big optical stages. I started to play with what are some off-the-shelf sort of consumer tracking systems, and we fell in love with this little camera called Elite Motion, and it's a really good solution for hand tracking. And it's used mainly with VR and strapping it to a headset, and you can see your hands out in VR space. But that led us to sort of hook characters to it and sort of generate this puppet feel. And I think what it offered us was a proof of concept that there is a real need and a real benefit to having these real-time characters, as well as the level of fidelity that these render engines like Unreal gave us. Like, we're simulating full fur and cloth, and we're seeing this beautiful lighting. The quality of it was so astounding, and our ability to sort of control these characters, it really immediately became apparent that CG characters are going to be something that are just going to be everywhere. And this was, probably us about 5 years ago really diving into this. We realized right away with MilScout, the quality was good enough that we could generate footage, and you're no longer dealing with a shot with a few frame handles. You're dealing with a full day of capturing final pixel animation. So what we learned right away is footage, now editorials making real animation, or real editorial choices on animation shots. We also found that we can present clients with finished versions of animated spots, and they could be like, oh, I like that one, boom, done. And that sort of display of how we're using real-time characters became really apparent. And then the fidelity and the tracking and how we're looking at them, these characters actually could be performed live. And we started to do some of that. We would go to conventions and have the characters interact with the members of on the floor, or we live stream and we're talking to audiences in chat, or we're TikToks and all these kind of things. Live performance immediacy of having your fully rendered character perform live and call and response with your audience. And what's exciting and why I really enjoy being in this space and what we're trying to push is the innovation of how do you use characters? What's the cool way to use them? And we've heard conversations around like real-time character reality shows where it's sort of streamed and maybe viewer feed, like there's all this crazy wacky ways to apply character work now that isn't just your traditional linear animated content, which we also can benefit from. The ability to be on set in all the ways we've been talking about, but see your character displayed on they'll have a big sort of monitor and you can see what's actually happening. So you have your performer out on stage and you're able to direct your animation and you're watching the result and that feedback of the client and the director talking to a performer, and then it can't be understated. It's live action now, sensibility around this performance capture.
I think, Jeff, the sporting events, like is that something that you feel like is a good application? Like I can imagine you having a crowd of people at like a hockey game or a football game, and you've got that mascot or that animated character that the animator or the puppeteer is interacting with that crowd, almost like, a lot of the sporting events in America is sometimes less about the game and more about the actual atmosphere and the people dancing or whatever they're doing in the audience. I feel like that interaction could be really fun.
Is a new way to engage with an audience. And I think everybody's learning. Brands are coming online, starting to understand, you can have my branded character talk back in response. They're not used to having improvisation. They want the message to be very honed. And so now it's like, actually, we're not the slowest aspect of production anymore. Now it's more approval of this. What is the messaging and how is the scripts going to be handled? Because we can just go on and just start talking. And the brand's like, whoa. So now it's interesting, the dynamics of how that is. So yeah, the call and response and however it's utilized, I think is where the power of this real-time stuff is. And then just real quick, I want to touch on sort of the hardware that's used and just sort of to give a broad spectrum. And there's all kinds of range and depending on your need, there's the optical stage, which is, its fidelity is, if that's what you're after, is probably your best bet. The deal with it is, though, it's a brick and mortar place that everyone has to converge at, and it's a place. That option to me was very restrictive. So we started looking at inertial tracking suits. And these are the same spandex suits with virtual ping pong balls, but they don't need the cameras. So these suits allow you, now we can take the character on set. We've been performing a lot during these work from home pandemic times out of performers' houses. Just allows us to have a much smaller footprint and get very comparable quality out of it. Like I think there's always sort of gives and takes with, when you start downgrading from these optical systems, but we've had some really good success with these inertial suits. So we've been proud to use those. Facial tracking, the high-end tracking systems for headsets like Dynamics's and stuff like that, I think are really, really powerful. But with the democratization of ARKit in an iPhone, which everybody has in their pocket, now you have hardware and software that's supported that you don't have to do, and all you have to do is plug into it. So ARKit has been an amazing tool for accessibility to just getting really beautiful Animoji style performance for your characters, and that's been good. But there's also, like we've seen and have been used, the HTC Vive has really made some amazing headway into sort of character tracking with their little trackers, and all of these we utilize, and depending on what the needs are and what we're doing, you know, everyone right now is talking about photorealism and humans, metahumans, and all these buzzwords and all, which I think is something that as we continue in the industry, this is going to be a known thing. It either looks like a real human or it doesn't. And I think, you know, seeing how Epic's releasing metahumans and making that democratized, I think that is a big step towards that, and where you're going to see these virtual humans everywhere, and they're going to get more realistic and used better. And AI maybe they don't have to be performance driven anymore; they're more AI driven. All of that I think is happening now. And what I'm really excited about is cartoons in real time. How do you teach a computer to watch Bugs Bunny commercial or cartoons, learn how Bugs Bunny moves, and build a model library of how that works? Then your performer goes out and does a jumping jack. Computer understands, oh, you want Bugs Bunny to do a jumping jack, and you get back a Bugs Bunny jumping jack. So these innovations, this kind of stuff, I think is a new frontier and a new horizon, because this stuff is going to be everywhere, and especially with the explosion of it during the pandemic. So we can have a performer in one location, and our engineers in another location, and our TAs and TDs in another location, clients in another location, and the signal and everything is all choreographed and all sort of streamed together, so we can record, you know, VTR signal, Final Pixel, or whatever. But all of that is really been driven by this pandemic work from home, which I think has been really great. So
what's interesting about this as well, I think, is that, you know, we're all talking about basically the same core technologies used for filmmaking as they are for all these other outputs too. And, you know, we all know that everyone experiences media in different ways now. But really, it's these same techniques for virtual production that is used also for interactive outputs, experiential outputs. And that's what I think really, really exciting about the future, is that filmmaking becomes not just about a linear screen. It becomes immersive. It becomes interactive. It's about, you know, taking that core asset and seeing it proliferate across so many different channels. I hope that's been insightful. Thanks to the guys here for all of their detailed insight into this world. We're going to be on the chat if anyone wants to type in some questions and stuff. But yeah, thanks a lot.